Hi, this is Emerald and welcome to the Diamond Net. And today I'm going to be talking to you about how to use shadow work to overcome the fear of success. Okay, so in today's video, we're going to be talking about how to overcome the fear of success using shadow work. Now, one thing that's really important to understand about the fear of success is that it's not really the success that you're afraid of. It's always some kind of unwanted side effect of the success. So let me give you some examples. So let's say that Lila, when she was a child, her mom, Renee, would always react very negatively to Lila's success. It was almost as though when Lila would, let's say, have some kind of success at school and then later on, maybe even at work, her mom would have this kind of jealousy, resentment, like a really negative reaction to her success. But let's back up to Renee, Lila's mom's childhood. And when Renee was a child, she was raised in a family that thought that higher education was something for boys and men to do, but not for women to do, and that women were better to be, sort of homemakers and like wives and mothers and things like that. And so when Renee really wanted to be a gym teacher, her parents basically forbid her from pursuing a higher education while giving her brother like a 100% full ride to whatever school he wanted to go to. And so let's say that that did come to pass and Renee became a wife and a mother but she didn't ever get to pursue her real dream of becoming a gym teacher. And so basically when Lila started showing, lots of independence and like interest in certain, let's say, career fields and things like that Renee didn't have access to, it would bring up a lot of negative feelings for Renee, and Renee would operate, let's say, very negatively in relation to Lila. And so then Lila starts to, let's say, have this association with, oh, if I am successful, then I lose this connection with my mom and this problem comes about with my mom. And so later on down the line into Lila's adulthood, Lila finds herself sabotaging and getting in the way of her success. And maybe it's like if she sees like an opportunity for a promotion, she finds ways to like throw that in the trash can, or like she gets in her own way in some way or another to avoid that success, because success was always associated with, let's say, having a negative relationship with her mom and having those negative feelings sort of directed at her from Renee, who, let's say, had this childhood where she was being really held back from her potentials. So that's one example of how fear of success can crop up for someone. But let me give you another example. Let's say that Timmy was expected to be really, really responsible, when he was a child, far beyond what a, let's say, small child is capable of. And maybe he even felt like he had to be responsible for his parents' emotions. Maybe he was kind of made a therapist by his parents where he had to really caretake them. And so he was bombarded by all this responsibility really young. And now that he's an adult, he finds himself, again, self-sabotaging, getting in the way of career advancement, getting in the way of his ability to really, let's say, live the life that he really wants to live. And that includes kind of stepping into more powerful roles, maybe even having, let's say, more money, more power, more things like that, to where he has some leverage in his life. But because power and responsibility tend to be associated with one another, if he has these early traumas around being made too responsible too young, he could, associate success and power and all of those other things with that overwhelm of, like, let's say, having so much responsibility and this feeling of being in like this low power, high responsibility kind of state. And so there's part of him from underneath the surface of consciousness that might try to throw all sorts of obstacles in his way to keep him from being successful. And he might feel this like intense fear of success. But in actuality, his fear of success is really an aversion to feeling too responsible too young, and that aspect of himself that's bore the brunt of that trauma of being too responsible too young or made to be responsible for things outside of the scope of his control might try to avoid success and power and those other, let's say, sort of positive things associated with more responsibility because of those early traumas. Now, another example, let's say that Talia's father was always, for his own reasons, in a deeply miserable emotional state. Like, he really could not open up to joy, couldn't feel any joy, and so he was just constantly in this state of misery. And because he was miserable, like he did not like to be around others when they were in better moods. Oftentimes there's that saying that like misery loves company. And so he would just kept like wanting to pull everyone down into his misery with him. So he didn't have to be alone in his misery. And so whenever Talia would be excited about anything, including her successes, what would happen is that that's when he would go into a rage, and he would try to, and he was doing this unconsciously, he would make sure that he could bring, let's say, everyone around him down into the same miserable feeling that he was, so that he could have that sense of connection. Again, doing this unconsciously. And so what Talia, let's say, learned is that, whenever I have anything that's going well, whenever there's success, whenever I have a positive emotion, when that happens, then that's when I'm going to be on the receiving end of this rage and all of this misery. And so the way that I can avoid that misery is by never allowing myself to be happy, never allowing myself to be successful. And so there can be this kind of, with this type of dynamic, a kind of cherophobia, like fear of happiness. And of course, success being something that's highly adjacent to happiness. So in this case, Talia avoids success. She avoids anything that's going to bring her into a positive state because she feels unsafe when she's feeling in a positive mood, because that's exactly when she would get sort of sniped at. All right, so before we get too much further into the video, I wanted to share with you that I have a brand new group coaching program called Shadow Work for Self-Sabotage. It's for ambitious people who tend to struggle with self-sabotage, procrastination, and other blocks to motivation and achieving their goals and living the life of their dreams. And if that describes you, if you feel like you're being held back by some deeper unconscious dynamics from the shadow, then I recommend go ahead and check out the link down in the description box where you can learn more about my program. And basically it's a shadow work based program, so it's all about pinpointing and resolving those underlying reasons for self-sabotage, including but not limited to fear of success. So if you want to hear more about that or learn more about that, go ahead and click the link below in the description box. And if you have any questions, you can contact me at thediamondnetchannel@gmail.com. All right, so back to the video. Now, when it comes to overcoming the fear of success, you want to first become aware of what that underlying reason, that underlying negative side effect of the success is that you're trying to avoid. So for example, if I go back into these examples, so in the case with Lila, the reason why she was fearing success is because she felt like she was going to lose connection with her mom if she was successful, because that's what she experienced, that her mom felt distant from her, resentful of her whenever she would have that success. And so success to her means coming with a side effect of disconnection. Now, if it's the case that she wants to do some shadow work to resolve this, what she has to do is she has to actually face into the underlying dynamics that are going on and the feelings of those disconnection experiences with her mom. And she has to be able to process through that feelings using somatic work. And she has to make sure that she remains connected to herself. Because ultimately, because her mom disconnected from her when she was successful, she also disconnects from herself when she's successful. So she would have to actually remedy that underlying dynamic. Or in the example with Timothy, who is afraid of success because, success comes with more responsibility, and he still has like a child aspect of him that still feels very overwhelmed at having to be so responsible so young and not being able to just be a carefree child. And so he has to really get in touch with that inner child aspect of him that feels totally overwhelmed by responsibility, and has to connect deeply with that part and meet whatever needs that aspect has. And that way that aspect can integrate and kind of grow up to where he is now, because his conscious personality is at whatever his present age is, but this aspect is still down in the shadow and is like, let's get away from the responsibility. I need this like carefree childhood time. Or in the example with Talia, whose father was always miserable and wanted to bring other people into his misery and didn't like being around anybody who was in a joyful state. Well, ultimately, there's the dynamic with disconnection from her father if she is successful. So part of the reason why she's keeping herself unsuccessful and unhappy is to stay connected with her dad. So there's this connection need that's being met there that would have to be sort of resolved internally. But then there's also a dynamic where it's like she's on the receiving end of like rage and like all sorts of like negative sort of behaviors from her dad to try to bring her into that negative emotional state that he's in. So she would also have to face on the level of the body, somatic work, facing into those feelings that are there and processing those through. And oftentimes those feelings can be buried. So it would probably take a lot of deep diving actually to bring those feelings up to the surface little by little and to remain in an emotionally regulated state while they kind of make their way through the nervous system and eventually can be let go of once they're fully processed. All right, so just as a quick recap, if you want to resolve the fear of success, what you first want to do is you want to pinpoint the unwanted side effects that you believe will come along with success. Now remember, success itself isn't the thing that you're afraid of, it's whatever that extra side effect is that you think is going to come about as a result of your success. And then once you know what that unwanted side effect is, you want to work through your resistances to that side effect. You want to essentially ready yourself to where even if that side effect came about, that you would be okay with that. Now oftentimes this takes like sort of somatic work and facing into aspects of yourself that are unconscious and creating connections within yourself. Oftentimes what we're trying to avoid in the external through avoiding success is really an internal emotion or part of ourself that we're trying to avoid. All right, so that's all I have for you for now. I hope that you enjoyed this video. Also, if you would like to learn more about my shadow work group program for overcoming self-sabotage, go ahead and click the link down below in the description box. Also, if you enjoyed this video, I think you're especially going to like this one. It's either over here or over here. And basically, it also has to do with another form of self-sabotage, so you want to check that out for sure. And keep becoming more you.